Mr. James Schwarz, how are you doing? Can you hear me? I can barely
Can
hear
you
you.
hear me now?
Okay, it's much
Can you
better.
hear me
Okay.
now?
Yeah, I couldn't hear you earlier.
It wasn't connecting to my headphones. So
Okay,
now
very
we're
cool.
good.
How are you?
I am well. I'm tired, but things are going good. The market is much better for producers. We have a futures contract in place, so it feels good. We're trying to ramp up to meet the full production that we want to be at now. So it's a lot of work. We're raising money, as you see in that deck. I've got a lot of different irons in the fire. So trying to kind of move everything along. But partied with a friend last night for his 50th birthday party. And yes, we had a blast. So today's a nice, quiet, laid back day.
Today is a good day for a podcast.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. So initially what I wanted to do is go over some of the topics that you seem to be interested in, and then of course jump in with anything that you feel like we didn't cover or you would be really passionate about. So
that's
deal?
Sounds good.
Okay, good. James, tell us a little bit about how you got involved in cannabis.
So I guess my early experiences with cannabis were, I smoked cannabis for the very first time the day I graduated high school, and then had a fairly active recreational relationship with the plant in college, also in conjunction with alcohol. So I think that, we confuse the powerful medical benefits of cannabis with some of the negative influences of alcohol, and we kind of look at the plant and why we're using it in that perspective. And so then a best friend of mine died. I had a bad spout with way too much alcohol and some other drugs, and it just led me down a path that wasn't healthy for me. I went sober for a while, and then eventually found cannabis again, and started really in using it with the medical benefits in mind, not just as much as a recreational product. And then when Oregon passed in '98, I moved out here in '99, and I wanted to be in a place where I didn't have to feel like a criminal for using a plant that I could grow in my backyard for its medical benefit. So it's kind of where the journey all started.
That seems very prudent. So you've been with medical marijuana almost since inception. So tell me, how has the field changed, and are the changes positive and exciting, or do you have any concerns coming up?
Well, I think that's a big, huge, broad topic. So there's parts of the medical market that, clearly are not good. The medical market is part of the market that tends to funnel a lot of product into the black market. It's generally untested. I know for a fact that there's plenty of farmers who use products on their plants that we know are harmful to the body, and in a recreational adult use setting would not be allowed. And I think that that's dangerous for the consumer. I think one of the reasons that we're probably seeing some of the vaping type problems is because, in the illicit market, there is opportunities for people to take advantage of people who are their customers. And by creating a standardized adult use market, I think that we can get rid of a lot of the dangers there. And then I kind of got off topic of what your exact question was.
You know what? Off topic is good. So I guess another off topic question perhaps is, do you feel that some of the additives the farmers are using are leading the crisis in vaping right now? Or what do you think is happening in that arena?
So I think that the vaping issue is somewhat multi-tiered, because you've got nicotine vaping, you've got cannabis vaping, you've got black market vaping, and clearly in the black market, you've seen the caliber of products that are in the market. They're generally out to make a quick buck. They don't have to try and build a brand, and so they're just trying to sell products. So they don't really care what they use in it. They want the cheapest products, and so that goes into, okay, what is your processing process? Okay, and then once you process it, what are you doing winterization with your oil? How are various methods of use, and how are you treating those products? But then, when you buy cheap garbage cartridges produced in China, you're going to have some problems there too. So I think that you see overall a problem in the whole spectrum, from when that cartridge is made in China to how the product was grown, to how the product was processed, to then the vehicle delivery device in terms of the cartridges put into somebody's hand. And so we can only fix the system when we're all playing by the same rules. And
Right.
so I think that we could have some real benefits. I think that the tobacco companies have a lot more data on vaping than they would like the rest of the population to know.
Right.
Clearly, they've studied their products, but the fact that vaping, whether it's nicotine or cannabis, there's nothing regulated about the devices or the industry, and that's
Right.
just scary. We've seen time and time again what industries do when they're essentially supposed to self-regulate, and it doesn't generally turn out very well for the consumer.
So how do you think, or I don't know if this is a regulatory question, but how do you think we can really make the product more safe, perhaps stem the black market, because it is a thriving market currently, and really have clean product in the hands of the consumer? How difficult do you think that is, and what steps do we need to take?
Well, therein lies kind of the whole purpose behind a tracking system. And just with any other consumer type products, you want to be able to trace that consumer product back to the manufacturer who created it. Because from a public health standpoint, that's the only way that you can really manage that system. And so to get rid of the black market, clearly we need a federal legal market. Is that going to completely take care of the problem? No. Clearly that there's always, just because we have a U.S. Treasury doesn't mean there's not people who try and, make currency. Or counterfeit currency. So, I think that the problem will be fixed for the most part. I think that we need to be doing research and study. One of the problems with that is it's very difficult to study cannabis type products. In Oregon, we had two cases of vaping issues, and in the one case, it was a cannabis product purchased from an adult use dispensary. So It was part of the system. So to look at that problem, then we got to understand, okay, what's going on deeper into that. My guess is that person probably also vapes tobacco, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Clearly the more you use these devices, the riskier it is, both because you never know when you're going to get a particularly shitty batch of product. You don't know how long your coil that you've been using, we know they degrade over time. and they become more toxic the more you use them.
Wow.
So you need to be aware of that, and so you should be changing cartridges or however you're doing it, and you should be mindful of where those cartridges come from. It's hard for the consumer to know all this just yet.
Yeah.
But certainly the nicotine tobacco companies should be sharing with us some of the information that they clearly know
Right.
about vaping.
Right.
And what we've seen so far is they see it's phenylacetate, which is a breakdown byproduct of vitamin E that's somehow being adulterated into the product, we think. But that's the best I got. We're trying to conduct a study right here in Oregon right now. So at PSU, we've got a new vape product we're trying to bring to the market, and we're trying to study that product with Dr. Robert Strongen at PSU, who's done a lot of the recent vape inhalation studies that have been done to date. And he's got a DEA license, and he's been trying to do some weed projects. They've kind of been stalled out, and he's working with the university right now. I'm trying to see if I can get the OLCC involved so that we can be a part of the solution to the vaping problem. And I think that really comes about when you have industry working with the regulators, working with the research teams, to really, try and find the solution to the problem, because it's a somewhat complex problem, and it needs, lots of different eyes looking at it. So
Right.
I'm hoping that we can push them along, but PSU is still a little nervous about doing cannabis studies because of the nature of the fact that it's a federally funded university, and federally funded universities are still very hesitant to get involved in illegal weed research. But I think there's hope. We're starting to see it change. So I think that this clearly the issue with vaping is real. People have started to pay attention to it, and it needs to be studied. And we need to allow research institutions who have been doing these kinds of studies on various products to help us understand them better and get that approval from the government to be able to do that. So I think we're close, but
there seems to have been a lot of footwork that's been done. Now, obviously, as a medical professional who is also in the cannabis business, do you feel that there's enough support for other medical professionals within the industry? And if the patients are truly getting the education that they need in order to be able to treat a variety of illnesses, or really for general well-being, do you feel that that information is out there, or how do you see the industry right now?
Yeah, I mean, it is complex because, as we've discussed, I mean, we've kind of superficially talked about the intricacies of the market itself, but as soon as you get below the surface, now you start talking endocannabinoid system, cannabinoid therapeutics. We're only beginning to understand these in the science community. There are very few substantiated medical kind of educational programs. There are a few, and there's more coming online, and I think that they're providing relatively good education and training. The most interesting one that I've come across is Jefferson Health System in Philadelphia is supposedly now running a master's in cannabinoid therapeutics program, which I wanted to actually check out, but just have been too busy. So the problem again is multi-tiered. So doctors aren't even educated about the endocannabinoid system in medical school, or very minimally, if at all. And so the first thing that we need is people who, should be teaching the other people to get educated. But
Right.
you still have some of the stigma
Right.
behind, cannabis. And so even doctors I know here in Oregon who clearly have seen the positive benefits of cannabis in patients with all kinds of various issues. The fact that they're still kind of in the anti-cannabis camp is just ridiculous to me as a healthcare professional. And the fact that we're failing to educate our physicians about a system in the body that interacts with every other system in the body in ways that we can't even begin to understand yet. But we know that it's a neuroprotective, has neuroprotective properties for remyelinating neurons. We've seen it help in seizures, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, autism. I mean, clearly there is plenty of supportive evidence. And so it is kind of stupid that we're still in this place where we're not doing research. Now, I did see that just in the last week or so that Donald Trump is supposedly allocating some or allowing some of the government resources to be allocated towards funding some research. My guess is that's going to be in some very select kind of places. But, we've got GW Pharmaceutical who brought us Epidiolex, who proved that cannabis, at least CBD, has real therapeutic potential, and that there is almost zero side effects, and it's a safe drug in almost every case. And so, a Schedule 1 drug is a Schedule 1 drug because it supposedly has no medical benefit and is high risk for abuse and addiction. And I look at the fact that we've been handing out opioids like candy, and yet we're sitting here going, oh no, don't touch the cannabis. But, it's, as you saw in some of my articles and whatnot, clearly there's big industry, putting their pieces on the board. But, GW Pharmaceutical showed us that up to 3, 4, 5, 10,000 milligrams of CBD is safe in children. I mean, it's crazy. And so the fact that, we can't have legal products on the market is ridiculous. Now that's particular to CBD, but we also know the safety and efficacy of the other cannabinoid compounds, and, namely THC. And I think what we see mostly in cannabinoid therapeutics is that some sort of, 1-to-1 up to about a 1-to-10 ratio of THC to CBD is really where we're seeing like some of the best results. But in certain cases, in certain disease processes, you need relatively high doses of things. But clearly microdosing is the wave of the future for cannabinoid therapeutics. And it's going to be, how do you target the right cannabinoids to the symptoms that we're dealing with? And I think that's what we're all trying to kind of start to understand right now.
So tell me a little bit more about microdosing. Is the general thought to microdose in order to, I guess, be healthy, or is it to treat a disease? And which cannabinoids do you recommend? CBD, THC, what dosages?
So quickly, cannabis is a biphasic drug. And what I mean by that is, on a bell curve, there is the onset for mechanism of action, and you have this increasing therapeutic benefit till you hit this kind of plateau area. And then you begin to, if you continue to use more, you actually go past the therapeutic benefit, and the backside of the bell curve actually starts bringing down the therapeutic benefit. So we mentioned in the pre-interview email that, the smoking yourself sober, and that's really where that kind of full scientific base for evidence of how you do that. And that's because the plant is telling you, you've had enough. You're not getting any more benefit from this. You should just stop using it right now. This plant never seems to nor cease to amaze me. So we know that the endocannabinoid system is the modulating system for the entire body. It helps with thermoregulation, to inflammation, to, all kinds of, in every facet of the body. And so with the endocannabinoid system, now you've got targeted dosages. And so there are particular symptoms where we see dosages need to be higher. In prostate cancers, it seems to respond better to higher doses of THC, but there's ways to get that THC without the intoxicating effect. You can take THCA, you can juice a plant. We know that CBG is kind of a stem cell molecule to THC and CBD. And so we can manipulate CBG in ways that it interacts with the endocannabinoid system in a different way through the use of terpenes. So as the terpenes and the flavonoids of the whole plant material interact in that synergistic entourage effect, what you get is receptor adaptation to non-similar molecules. So this THC receptor site now is actually binding to a CBN cannabinoid or a CBG cannabinoid because of the way the terpenes interact with it. So I can't remember exactly what your question was, and I apologize. I get off on tangents.
No, tangents are always interesting. So it was about, essentially, the idea is, say I'm a patient or someone that really wants to supplement my nutrition. Right. What would be the recommendation? What would I do?
So, and microdosing. And so as we, just kind of talked about how that biphasic drug principle. So what we've kind of seen in the studies that's been done, Dr. Jeffrey Chen out at UCLA did a nice look at this. And for CBD, about 45 milligrams a day is kind of max therapeutic benefit from a routine maintenance dose. So for me, that basically means I'm taking 20 to 25 milligrams in the morning and 20 to 25 milligrams at night. And I do that regardless of if I'm in any pain or feel like I need it. My belief in the power of CBD to heal the body, I won't call it like the fountain of youth, but I do believe that its ability to reduce and control the inflammatory response in the body, which is what causes a cascade of other health issues as you kind of go through all those pathways. So microdosing is, in a THC world, a microdose is 2 to 5 milligrams at a time. And you typically want to see that probably over, 2 to 4 hours, depending on how you're ingesting it and what exactly you're ingesting it for. So as you look at, 2 to 5 milligrams, say, 4 to 6 times a day, you're looking at, about 10 to 25 milligrams of THC a day. You combine that with, 45, 50 milligrams of CBD, and you're right in that kind of 2-to-1 ratio, which I think is where we see a lot of just overall good therapeutic benefit. I think that people tend to waste a lot of their product, and it basically comes from not cleaning your system out. I think what you see universally with physicians who are practicing in cannabinoid therapeutics definitely like to see their patients have a cleansing spell for about a week. It helps clear some of the receptor sites, allowing for better reactivation with microdoses, and kind of resets the body's clock as to how much cannabis that you need to get the therapeutic benefit that you're after. So that would be how I would recommend in general, is at least something in a 1-to-1 kind of realm, and, take the minimum that you need for it to be therapeutic. And so if you take 2 to 5 milligrams and an hour later you're still feeling the symptoms, take it a little bit sooner. Right. What we know about CBD is it lessens the intensities of the THC. So it elongates the time frame that it acts. So instead of kind of getting really high quickly because you just smoked a bunch of THC and now you're high in 5 or 10 minutes, and 45 minutes you're starting to come down, and maybe you're getting tired, and maybe that's the therapeutic benefit you're looking for. But maybe you want that pain relief to last 2 to 4 hours, and you want to be more focused and clear-headed. So that's where using that CBD in conjunction with that THC when you're really maximizing therapeutic benefit for yourself.
Now, is there a ceiling effect, or is it possible to overdose on cannabis? How does it compare to, maybe opiates in that regard?
Clearly, opiates are a huge problem. The numbers kind of fluctuate from about 40 to 70,000 people a year die from opioid overdose deaths. To my knowledge, there is not a single reported case of an overdose death related to cannabis. People have put the toxic amount somewhere around 3,000 pounds.
Wow.
I don't think that there's anybody in the world that could consume 3,000 pounds in a day unless they processed it into some immense formulation of oil, and you just took a bottle full every day. But at that level of THC and everything else, it would be too sticky to even get it down, I don't think. So no, I don't think that. I have not experienced any really unusual or unpleasant side effects to cannabis therapeutics, other than we've seen a few cases of cannabis hyperemesis syndrome. And, when you look at the overall usage of cannabis and the number of people that are complaining of this, it seems like a relatively small problem, but it is an interesting disease process that I think that we need to understand, as it'll help us understand how to use these therapeutic drugs more effectively. Because clearly there's some people that react. Now, again, I think that the reaction is actually occurring to an adulterant that is in the product rather than the cannabis itself. Some people have made some suggestions of a correlation between using neem, which is an organic IPM treatment. It comes from the neem tree. And some people have suggested that might play a part in cannabis hyperemesis, but there's also the application. When are you applying that neem? How did you apply it? Was it used improperly? And so there's too few cases because they're isolated. I mean, I probably, I talk to people all over the country who use cannabis, and I, for a fact, only know of probably a handful of them that have actually ever experienced that cannabis hyperemesis syndrome. Now, with that said, I experienced it once when I was in college, and I overused cannabis. Alcohol wasn't even a part of the scene, but I think I did like 15 bong hits in an hour, and the next thing I know, I was laying in the bathroom puking my guts out. And that's similar to with alcohol. That's the body telling you you've overused,
right?
And we're gonna make you feel it now.
So if a patient finds themselves in that situation, what do you recommend?
If it's true cannabis hyperemesis syndrome, they probably need medical attention, because if it's truly them having hyperemesis to the point that they're not able to keep anything down, obviously you start to get into the, you're dehydrated, you're dry, you're more at risk for other issues happening. And, so I think that if it's true and you're not able to recover, that you should be seeking medical attention. I think that for the most part, most of us, if you probably lay down and drink some water, and turn the light down, you'll probably be fine in a few hours. Generally, in healthcare, when I've treated patients who come in because they smoked too much weed, they generally get an IV of fluid and maybe something to just help them sleep a little bit. But otherwise, we just turn off the light, give them some IV fluid, and let them rest. And in generally 2 to 4 hours, they feel fine and are ready to go home from the emergency room. So
So
I
basically,
think that for the most part, most people are going to be fine. But at the same time, as a healthcare professional, I'm certainly not going to tell them not to seek treatment if they think that that's
sure.
something that they need.
And it sounds like time is your friend. If you find yourself in that situation, there's a certain amount of time that's needed to process the existing cannabinoids in the system until the patient feels better.
Yes, and in some cases, taking CBD can actually help.
Okay.
But I don't think that just because it doesn't contain THC that there's not a risk of cannabis hyperemesis syndrome.
Interesting.
I think it can be a combination of cannabinoids. So, but in most cases, I would tell the person to probably take some CBD because it should lessen the severity of the unpleasant side effects that are usually related to THC. As we saw in one of the most isolated studies was a study out of England where they gave people intravenous THC, intravenous CBD, a placebo, and then a combination of CBD THC. And in almost every case, all of the unpleasant side effects of cannabis were related to the THC. So the insomnia, the anxiety, the paranoia, that kind of stuff, that was always were in almost every case related to the THC. In the CBD patients, they almost universally reported just an overall feeling of well-being. They felt good. They didn't really have any unwanted side effects from the CBD. And then, of course, in the synergistic compound, the CBD THC group, they were the most highest in terms of how much pain control they had, and usually a higher reduction in anxiety and overall health too. So, but almost universally, the CBD patients were very much relaxed and feeling good, whereas the THC patients were the ones who were experiencing the unpleasant side effects.
Now, CBG seems to be getting some press as of late. Is there any comparison between CBG and CBD? Is it still medically effective? And if so, in what situations, and what is the recommended dosage for that?
The recommended dosage on CBG, I couldn't give you right now. I don't know enough of how it's being used, and I can give you some referrals to some of my friends that I'm probably more familiar with dosing on CBG. But what I know is in the plant, it is a very minor cannabinoid. So it typically only shows up in your plants at about less than 0.5% of cannabinoid. And usually it's more down like 0.2%. And so we know that it has value because of, as I mentioned, the fact that it's, this kind of precursor stem cell to, both the formation of CBD and THC. And so it has a lot of value for potentially pharmaceutical companies doing stuff in labs to help create synthetic compounds that are, plant-based. And so I think that there's some real potential for some benefit, and more research needs to be done as a whole, because it's such a small percentage of overall cannabinoids in the plant that it's much more expensive. So I think a kilo of CBG runs about $50,000. And I think a kilo of CBD runs about $3,000. So it gives you a fairly good idea of how it's valued right now.
Interesting. Now, obviously you've been in the market for some time and the market's evolved. Where do you see the market going from this point on? There seems to be many challenges that are presenting themselves, but do you feel like there are specific and wonderful actions that someone that's entering in the industry can take to be successful?
So the market is clearly developing. We are moving closer and closer to federal legalization. I think that that's not going to take the form of what most people think. It's not like all of a sudden there's going to be this moment where now weed is legal across the country. So I'll tell you why I make the determination that I make, and I'll tell you that at the end. But so in Oregon, this summer or this legislative session, we passed the export bill. And what our export bill is supposed to do is give our governor and the regulatory authority of the OLCC the ability to begin to negotiate what it will look like when we have interstate transfers of product. And so the OLCC is going to the feds and understanding from them, like, what are the things that should be off limits that we won't want to do that maybe you would, step in and have a problem with? And how can we begin to operate this space as clearly we are moving towards federal legalization? And the time is now to start creating the marketplace and how it's going to look. And so for me, what I believe in what we've been doing here in Oregon is the OLCC already currently acts as a distribution company for alcohol. And I think that what you'll end up seeing is the OLCC will become a distribution collection point for cannabis from growers. And at some point in time, then they'll set up this transfer. And so the OLCC will go to, Cal Liquor Board. I can't remember what they are in California. And they'll register this transfer through Metric. And instead of like Cascade High or any Wild or any of these other businesses necessarily selling their product directly from their manufacturing facilities or wherever to a dispensary in California, it'll be more like a bundle of products that get shipped out as one particular shipment. Because the one important point to the federal government is they want to be able to track it. And the main reason they want to be able to track it is because they want to tax it and make revenue.
Sure.
So as long as you're meeting those sort of guidelines, and that's basically why they've allowed states to operate the way they have, even while it's still federally illegal, as long as it can be tracked. And so I think that initially what we'll see is for what Oregon's looking at, it's going to be states that share a border or borders another state with legal cannabis. So what you could potentially see is an avenue of commerce that opens up from Canada down through Washington, Oregon, California, Arizona, Nevada. And you don't have to cross a state that's where they still have cannabis as illegal. Yeah. And so I think that the federal government will start to piecemeal a system together like that. But I think that we clearly are moving in that direction, as we saw with the deal from Canopy Growth Corp and Acreage Holdings. And that one was an interesting deal because Canopy Growth Corp, the largest cannabis company in Canada and probably the world. I would have to check on like how it compares to like Afria or Luxaria, but They did a deal with Acreage Holdings. Acreage Holdings is the company that John Boehner is on the board of directors for. Clearly a Republican conservative who was relatively against cannabis is now on the board of a company and who's just been bought out by the largest Canadian company. And Canopy Growth Corp put $300 million down on the table for that deal that Acreage Holdings gets right now, but the deal doesn't even go into effect until federal legalization.
Interesting.
So you're not going, a company like Canopy Growth Corp is not going to use up $300 million of operational capital unless they were getting it for a very specific reason. And so clearly we are on the verge of federal legalization, and you're seeing the dam start to break. I think that we'll actually get the Safe Banking Act passed this year. It's gone through both houses and their committees. There's a few final committee steps left in the Senate, and then a version will go back to the House. But I think that we'll see it. I'm actually going back to DC in the end of October to do a final lobbying push for the Safe Act. But I think that we're going to see that this year. And if we do, the landscape is going to change in a real quick hurry, because all of this money that's been sort of sitting on the sidelines, or maybe it's been sidelined a little bit through privately held other, shell companies that are in the industry. But once you can start to bank and commerce really starts to open up, and banks are making money now and insurance companies are making money, I think the system changes, and it changes relatively quickly. But you've also got Trump kind of makes statements on both sides of the issue, but overall, I think that he's clearly made some allowances, but then at other times he does something. But the same was true for kind of Obama and his administration. So the FDA is starting to have to deal with problems. One of the people who are pushing really hard on the SAFE Act with Congress right now is the banking industry, because they've got all of this hamstrung system together where they're supposed to not do it, but they do it, and they are allowed to. But so they're really, I think, both frustrated and need some clarity to the system. The same is true for CBD products on the market and the FDA not being involved in them, so to speak. So I think that we'll see a lot of industry start to really form. And as I've talked about from the beginning, parts of cannabis will end up in the pharmaceutical industry, parts of cannabis will end up in the tobacco industry, parts of cannabis will end up in the alcohol beverage industry. And that's what we'll start to see take shape. And I think that there's some real benefit to that. I think that it's also hard as a small business. I think that you're suddenly going to be dealing with another level of challenges, but it also could be helpful because, I have a purchase order for my farm now, and in any normal business circumstance, you would get bank financing on purchase orders for future product, and but you can't do that in this industry, and so I can't get a normal bank loan. So, if Safe Banking X passes, I will likely be able to go to a bank for operational loans, like a normal business. I can get out of 280E tax code likely because, that makes paying taxes in this industry really hard when none of your otherwise business deductible expenses are a deduction for a cannabis business, whether it's your administration, your executive salaries, your as a bank account here in Oregon cost me $1,000 a month just to have the bank account.
Wow.
Well, that's $12,000 a year to a small business. That could put a lot of people out of business right there.
Wow.
And that's not even a tax deductible expense to the business.
Right. Lots of challenges and lots of obstacles. So it looks like legalization may be around the corner, and it looks like a lot of these issues will be sorted out.
Yeah, my prediction is we'll see some level of interstate commerce in the next 18 months. And I think that if we haven't actually passed something through the federal government, it's being chipped away at continually, and that's generally what you see in this industry. Is just this continually chipping away at the policies. But at the same time, like, it's hard building a new industry from the ground up, and especially one that has so many interesting, intricate, complex parts to it, like cannabinoid therapeutics and regulation of a plant that someone's combusting and inhalating. So it's happening. I think the rest of the world is clearly in the same camp. I think Canada legalizing has really sped the game up, and it will be some form legal here, I bet, in the next 18 months, in terms of at least like interstate transfers out of Oregon or amongst other states that have legal programs, which is part of the States Act. So the other bill that's kind of been languishing around in Congress is the States Act, and that one basically says that in states that have legal programs, they deschedule cannabis, which will also have the same sort of effects as the Safe Banking Act, which basically allows us banking services, should allow us to pay normal taxes, and kind of get rid of some of the last true burdens for the industry.
Well, it certainly is a complex and evolving industry. What would be your suggestion for someone that might want to enter the field, whether professionally or through investments? Any thoughts of wisdom?
I think depending on sort of what level investing you're talking about and how you want to get involved, I think that if you want to have a safer bet, you'll put your small amounts of money, your 5, 10, 15, 20,000, maybe $25,000 into larger companies that have clearly developed. So your Canopy Growth Corps, your Afria, your Lexaria Bioscience, some of those companies that have clearly bankrolled some expensive operations and, are, I think, on the cutting edge of some of the science, which is definitely going to give them a leg up in the market. And they've clearly already established, sets of market share. I think that if you're someone who has more money than that and you want to get in on, the ground of some startup, that you need to be really reticent of the due diligence that you do on that company or that idea. There's a lot of people in this industry that don't know the industry at all, that are maybe just thinking they're in it to make a quick buck, and they're just starting to encounter challenges. I mean, we see it everywhere, whether it's Colorado or Washington or Oregon or California now. The challenges that small businesses face, from zoning issues that prevent you from ever opening your doors, to lab testing issues, to you name it, you encounter it in this industry. And so there's in any small business world, 9 out of 10 businesses fail. In this industry, I'm guessing it'll probably be like 9.5. And so if you're going to get involved on that kind of a level, you should definitely make sure that you're doing your due diligence on whatever company that you're looking at investing in. For someone who's trying to be involved in the industry, it depends on what level. Like I said, there's a lot of those bigger companies are looking for people, and whether they be scientists working in labs, to marketing sales people, to operations people, depending on what your area of expertise is. So Me as a business owner, I think that there's some benefit to understanding the plant a little bit, but at the same time, I think that depending on what part of the industry, and if if you come to it with a bunch of bias or previous mm, expectations or assumptions about the market, that sometimes that's not always beneficial. And so I tend to try and hire people that are coming from related fields and have demonstrated, how to work hard. Certainly, being able to trust your employees and the people who are working in your companies is important, because you're working with cash, you're working with a lot of light, easy product that's easy to be removed from the system by someone who wanted to be dishonest. So I think trust and is an important quality for anybody. But beyond that, I'm working with another organization called Cannabis Nurse Network. And Nurse Heather is building a big, huge facility, or the facility's there now in California, and they're going to be doing medical education and patient education, and I think clinics where there's going to be actual use of products and whatnot. So I think that those are cool places where you can start to go find information. If you want to be in the industry, there's an industry conference, probably at least one every week somewhere. I think that there's better ones. I think the Cannabis Science Conference is one that offers a lot of good science. I think NCIA does a good job of offering cool seed to sale kind of show programs that are more on the business operations side of things. There's many others out there. So I think that you can go find education if you want. Green Flower Media is another one that I think puts out a lot of high quality education. They offer a lot of different human resources type classes for training you, from everything from bud tending in a dispensary to cultivation stuff to just about anything that you can think of in the market. And I think the more that we educate everybody on there's some people that have no idea you have an endocannabinoid system.
Right.
It's the fact that we've neglected to tell people, oh, by the way, at the same time we've been telling you these drugs are completely harmful for you. By the way, your body produces those on its own anyway.
Right.
I think that it's kind of shocking to people, and so the more that we can open people's eyes, and one of the things that I really love about CBD and where that is as an industry is it's made people really comfortable with starting to test out some of these products. We see the elderly and the baby boomer generations looking towards solutions for their problems, and they're finding CBD and it's helping them. And so I think that that's really started to open the door. And we as an industry as a whole need to work together towards continuing to push that piece of education getting to the consumer, so that they know that there's an option, that maybe if their latest West Coast pharmaceutical pill isn't taking care of their problems, or it's creating 7 other problems for them, that there could be some healthy alternatives that come from a clean plant that has almost zero harmful side effects. So the more that we can educate, the more people know, I think the further along it's going to get. And yeah.
Awesome. In the next, let's say 5-10 years, what would you like to see in the cannabis market? Or what would you hope to see in the cannabis market? What would make you really thrilled?
I think first and foremost, and I hate that I'm even saying this, but we need a regulated market where product is tracked and traced. I don't like, you can pull any number of the recent CBD investigations that have been done, and they look at 10 to 30 products, and almost less than 5% of them actually have the proper dosage without any other adulterants in it. And the fact that that's the case is disgusting to me as a healthcare professional, that we're allowing all of these crappy products into the market that we know have potentially harmful impacts on people, especially when they're using them for a health benefit. So as much as I hate the burden of the regulation, the only way that you can be sure that your product is what it is and that it's safe is if it's part of a system that's tracked and traced from the time it's a plant to the time it becomes oil to the time it gets manufactured into a pill or a suppository or a chocolate or a gummy bear or whatever. You have to be able to trace that product. And so we're going to have to be sensible about how we implement that, certainly on the CBD level, because, in cannabis, I track every single plant that I have. Everyone gets an RFID tag. The OLCC knows exactly how many plants I have, what rooms they're in, when I harvest those plants, how much weight I threw away in stem, how much weight I got in flower. And there's some benefit to that, but at the same time, it's not realistic for, say, a hemp farmer that's, farming 5,000 acres. I mean, that's a ridiculous concept that we would be tracked on that level. But at the same time, we want to make sure that when that farmer harvests that 500 or 1,000 or 5,000 acres, that it's coming into a collection site at their facility, getting processed down and getting tested. And before it enters the market, that the product has to be tested. And that's one way that you start that process. But we have to be sensible. I mean, we're a bit extreme on the cannabis side. And hopefully that continues to normalize over time. And I think that that's a space where hemp and cannabis can really work together on several fronts, whether it's banking or how it's regulated. To the other problem that CBD companies have recently run into is payment processing methods.
Right.
I think we're gonna get over all of this with the Safe Banking Act, and so I'm particularly encouraged to see how that helps. But yeah, it's all of that. And like I said, I hate regulation and overregulation, but clearly the industry needs sensible regulation, because we are talking about products that people are using for very difficult symptoms and disease processes, that we want to make sure they're getting the best products and that they're not contributing to making them more unhealthy, which is, I think, unfortunately what we see in a good share of the products now.
Wow. Well, thank you. That was a wealth of information. Is there any final thoughts or anything that you'd like to end with?
I think that we just need to continue to spread the information. And so I appreciate what you're doing with this podcast. I'm actively out there speaking out for the plant and the treatment that it offers. I believe that cannabis is a wellness drug that we should all be feeding our endocannabinoid system in some way, with some fraction of cannabinoids that improve our overall health for various reasons. So people should just continue to open their minds, and the people who are a part of it need to continue to openly share the information and get it to people so that they understand what's possible. And then start to dispel the myths and the fallacies about the plant, like reefer madness, which was just a ridiculous take on what happens to you when you use cannabis. So that would be it.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you for lending us your expertise and your time, and good luck with all the amazing projects you're involved in. And we will connect soon.
Happy to do it. Pleasure was mine.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.